Hello and welcome to the webinar titled Adapting to the New World with Enterprise Service Management, which is jointly presented by Newgen Software, a global software vendor with products and solutions in the space of business process management, enterprise content management, and customer communication management. We are hosting it together with Forrester, one of the largest research and analysis firms in the world. I thank you all for the overwhelming response that we obtained for the webinar. My name is Ritesh, and I shall be your host and moderator for this webinar today. The webinar, we have the privilege to have with us Mr. Charles, who is the principal analyst at Forrester, and Mr. Anurag Gupta, who is the Center of Excellence head for Enterprise Service Management at Newgen Software. So let me begin by a short story. In this time of need, my health insurance was expiring. Feeling worried, I tried to call up the call center and ask them that, look, my health insurance is expiring. I want to increase my premium. What do I do? They kind of simply told me that, look, our call centers are totally shut down. You can pay through the internet and get it going. Now, I'm not too okay with that. I need to speak to someone. Now, that puts everyone into a problem. It puts the call center into a problem because no one is available. It puts the insurance company into a problem because they run a risk of losing me as a customer. And I'm into a problem because at this time of need, I have no option but to renew my policy as and where is basis. So that kind of poses a problem like never before. Good morning. And I just want to say that we are living in a state of unprecedented crisis like we have never seen before. Not in our lifetimes and probably not in our father's generation's lifetime as well. Who could have thought that a mere virus who's just a nano centimeter or a nano millimeter big would put the whole world under a lockdown which will cause financial, social, mental crisis everywhere that we look around. Social distancing, contactless business, and digital are the norms of today. And the most hit are the contact centers, which need to be virtual and yet in contact. So concepts of bots, emails, uh, social, portal, get into the new normal, and we've all started to live with it. But are we all enjoying it? I'm not too sure. So, in today's webinar, we would kind of understand these aspects which are disturbing us day in and day out. And we are all worried as to how would the new normal be and what would we be looking at. I would like to invite Charles to discuss on enterprise service management in the COVID-19 era and how companies can adapt to the new normal. Charles, over to yourself.
Thank you, Ritesh. And you are absolutely right. These are unprecedented times, although not unexpected. And we at Forrester are certainly tracking with concern and care how this is playing out in the economy and how organizations can adapt. Of course, one of the first reactions I have is to view this as an expression of an increasingly VUCA world. VUCA is a term that military strategists at the US Pentagon, for example, will often use in discussing warfighting and military conflict, how the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And this is in contrast to how we often have thought about business. We try to reduce variation in business. We try to make business predictable. But the reality is how can business be predictable when the world around it is not? And of course, today we see the social distancing, the social isolation, we see the closure of not only retail establishments, but entire campuses, organizational headquarters. We see the move to online working and the relative isolation of the worker, the remote worker, who is now trying to get their job done as best they can without access to many of the resources that they are accustomed to having and benefiting from, such as well-staffed call centers. The call center operators are now operating from home as best they can. And whether you're an internal customer who needs help from your IT department, or you're an external customer such as Ritesh looking to renew his insurance, if the call center has been shut down, we definitely have a problem. And for the remote worker, if I work every day, I go into work at my office headquarters, at my company's headquarters. And if I have a problem with HR, I need to maybe update my insurance coverage, my benefits coverage before I pay. I can just walk down to third floor and I know that somebody from the HR department is there and they can talk to me. They can tell me who I should talk to. Same thing for legal. Same thing for marketing or supply chain. Is my requisition gone through, my purchase order, my invoice, my accounts payable, etc. All of these services are available to me, and I simply need to walk down the hallway, go up and down the elevator, and then I talk to my colleagues and I get my problems fixed. But when I'm at home, I'm operating blindfolded. I no longer know critical things about my enterprise. I don't know who to talk to. I don't even know what services are available to me. And this lack of knowledge is especially a problem because the modern economy is based on the rise of the knowledge worker. The 20th century was the century of the manual worker. The 20th century was all about repeatable processes carried out on the assembly line. The manual worker repeatedly would tighten the screw, or they would assemble the car. And the knowledge worker, what differentiates them is that their days are always different. They are in a world of unknown unknowns. They don't know what problems they're going to be called on to solve day to day. And a day in their life is often characterized by a series of very complex interactions. Whether you're an employee, a contractor, a supplier, or even a customer, you're in an ongoing pattern of interactions with the functional areas in any given enterprise, whether it is support, customer service, accounting, HR, facilities, and all of this becomes opaque to the chief operations officer. Now, why does this matter? Well, think about it if we compare it back to the age of the manual worker. The chief operations officer had great visibility into what was happening, where the work in process was. You knew that materials were moving from Chicago, Illinois, down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, for example. And this was all visible and apparent. But in the world of knowledge work, the work in process is invisible work in process. And how do we understand and manage this invisible work in process? Sometimes not very well. McKinsey says that the highly skilled knowledge worker will spend 20% of their time looking for internal information, tracking down colleagues who can help with specific tasks. This remains a problem, and it is even more a problem for the knowledge worker who finds themselves working remotely. And Why is this important to the modern business? Well, ultimately, the value chain, the basic value of the enterprise, of the organization, is based on the relationship, the increasingly tight feedback loop between research and development and deployment and testing of digital solutions. And this is not only for internal systems, it's for external market-facing digital value propositions. So we see that in the core of the value chain, in the bottom half of the value chain, we now have DevOps. We see the creation of new ideas, the building of code, the testing, the release, deployment, monitoring, and then the feedback loop, all supported via enterprise service management, exposing these critical functions of legal, finance, HR, sales, operations, support, and the IT function itself. And everything is being operated as an internal product team. And whether it is facing the external market, bottom to the right, or supporting the delivery of the value chain internally, as we see along the top. And this is why the service portal becomes so important. This is a well-known example from CERN, who run the super collider in Switzerland, in the European Union. And notice that IT services are only one of a couple dozen, 20 services here. IT services, we often think of IT service management. Service management is only about, well, give me a new laptop, give me a new cell phone. Here, they have expanded their concept of service management. They understand that finance is providing services, that occupational health and safety are services, that there are specialized services for laboratories and experimenters, that there are regulatory services. These are all just services that the organization needs to provide its ultimate value on a day-to-day basis. And IT, only one of 24. This is the future for the modern organization. It is all services that support you in your pursuit, in your delivery of the ultimate value proposition of your organization. If we think about it systematically, we can see that some services are production services. They are the services you expect to be always available, always on. Availability and performance services, where it makes sense to talk about 5 nines availability. This is in contrast to the provisioning of services. So I might have an HR application that I expect it to be available 7 by 24 at 4 nines, but that is a different question than the fact that Mary just onboarded as an HR analyst, and how quickly can we get Mary provisioned to the HR system? That's a provisioned service. It's the provisioning aspect of the HR service. And then what if somebody calls Mary and needs help with a challenging HR case? We might guarantee that Mary will be provisioned to the HR service in 72 hours because it's a very repeatable process. But Mary, all she can offer as her service is a consultation, and she doesn't know how quickly she will resolve anything because the problems that come to her are complex cases. And so the best that we can offer there is a response SLA. And so to recap, notice that the production service, some, but not all, production services require or support a provisioning process. And that for the professional services, especially if you're, for example, an infrastructure engineer in your IT organization, the trend is to commoditize and to automate and to push things towards self-service, but we never get there completely. There are always complex professional judgments that need to be made, and this is where people actually then add value in their day-to-day conduct and support for the enterprise services being offered. Overall, the enterprise service management system consists of an aggregation portal that lets you know, it informs you, it allows you to discover the services that your organization is offering. There's some middleware, some plumbing, and identity and entitlement management and brokering in the middle. And then on the bottom, there is a fan out, because the ESM system does not necessarily fulfill everything that is required. The ESM system serves as a broker, a proxy for your systems of record, whether there's something that you're building and developing completely internally and supporting via a DevOps pipeline, as we see bottom left, whether they are a service that can be completely built and supported within the low-code, no-code platform of the ESM system. Newgen Software, for example, has a very powerful platform that you can use to construct various workflows. Or it's an external service such as Amazon or Azure that then you are brokering in from an external provider, perhaps a BPO provider. Newgen Soft supports BPO providers as well. And they might provide you a payroll service. ADP, for example, provides a payroll, well-known payroll service. And then the role of the service portal is to simply broker your access to that and show you how to get there and contact the people. And increasingly, we have virtualization, we have chatbots, we have natural language processing, we have natural language understanding that makes it much more easy to discover the services you need and to be routed correctly to the right alternative. Because along the bottom, I may have simplified it, but there may be hundreds or thousands of individual services and workflows that you need to be able to find in a quick and timely way from your remote working location. Services such as IT services. Laptops and computers still break, even if you're working at home. Maybe you don't have somebody come out and fix it. Maybe you now have to have things drop shipped from Dell or Lenovo to your home location, and then they're being fixed back by the vendor. Your human resources services. It is still, we still are hiring people, and in some cases we find it necessary to put them on furlough, to put them on temporary leave during the pandemic. I heard a case the other day where an enterprise service management platform was very useful to a company that unfortunately had to put some people on leave because of the pandemic, and they had to do things at a scale they'd never done before. Hopefully we will move back into a mode where the problem that people have is the problem we want to have of needing to hire more people than are available in the market. That's a problem I think we'd agree we would rather see. Certainly the supply chain is still there. We still need to track, as I indicated earlier, requests for quote, purchase orders, master agreements, legal needs to approve a contract. Perhaps contracts are being renegotiated because of the pandemic. We're invoking force majeure clauses, natural calamity kinds of clauses. Your lawyers are probably still busy. How do you reach them? How do you even know where to find them without an overall ability to route your work? And of course, a big part of what your lawyers might be doing is helping to manage your supply chain. And this is where your purchasing and logistics professionals also come in. What happened to my shipment? We have things hung up in the ports now. We have things hung up at different ports of entry because of increased scrutiny, because of the global situation. And yet we are still trying to keep the factories working. We're trying to bring people back to work. They need the raw materials. They need the purchase orders, the invoices, the requisitions, the advanced ship notices. All of these things need to still keep flowing, and you need to find out critical information as to where things are in the supply chain. This doesn't change. And so ultimately, getting things done in an increasingly VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, whether it's on employee onboarding, other cross-functional processes, campus guests will be coming back, and those are a great use case when we finally do reopen our campuses. The managing and supporting guests to your campus will again become a problem. But in this VUCA world, we need processes to be more adaptive, to be more flexible. So we need the low-code, no-code platforms that vendors such as Newgen Software are offering us so that we can get things done at the end of the day. And in conclusion, I strongly encourage you to think in terms of your remote worker, of your customer. Are you able to, with sufficient agility and quick time to market, support their needs in this rapidly changing world, provide them the information that they need to continue operating in these challenging new circumstances. And with those closing thoughts, I want to turn it over to my good friend Anurag, who is going to tell us all about Newgen Soft's very effective offerings in this space. Anurag, over to you. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Anurag, if I may. So thanks, Charles, for such an enlightening thought. VUCA as a concept, you're correct, was typically used in military, but I guess in today's times, the scary thing that we live in, VUCA becomes very, very relevant to us. And of course, we don't want organizations to go dark on their customers. But it's not just the customers that people are worried about, it's the entire ecosystem, employees, partners, uh, consultants, maybe vendors. We need to cater to everyone. You don't know where the virus would be coming in from and hitting every one of us. So the new normal kind of makes you aware. It makes you ready for combat, so as to say. The task at hand is large, and everyone is at sea as to what to do. And everyone is perplexed as to what to expect and what kind of uncertainties we are all facing towards. So it's nice that we have experts like yourself, Mr. Charles, and experts like Mr. Anurag on today's call to kind of give us some insights on use cases and technology interventions of ESM. Anurag, over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritesh, and thank you, Charles, for the informative presentation on ESM in general. I'll be talking primarily around a select use cases and how technology interventions can help us automate them. So before we start or dwell into more details about the use cases we have picked up, just a very quick overview of the Enterprise Service Management Framework. It's essentially a framework to manage requests in a fragmented enterprise landscape. What we see are multiple types of customers. We have external customers, the real consumers who are buying our goods and services. We have employees who are our internal customers. And of course, we have partners or vendors. Typically, they reach out to our organization through multiple channels, and they have different types of requests, queries, or complaints that need resolution. Now, these can flow through different departments in an organization. And of course, there are a lot of other supporting systems, a complete enterprise IT landscape, which is providing the IT backbone for these functions to happen. Essentially, enterprise service management goes through in between all these functions and systems and creates a framework where they can work seamlessly and they can provide the expected response or resolution to the external or internal customers. Now, I'll be talking about a couple of ESM scenarios today. The first one is around a simple case in insurance policy update, focusing on a well-defined process, how it can be improved. And the second one will be about tackling incidents of an unknown type with changing activities, dynamic activities, resulting in an evolving process. So starting with the first scenario of a policy update, which can transcend channels and at times it needs a very quick response. So let's first meet our lead actor, Peter Quill. He's a young, successful, extrovert professional who believes in living in the fast lane. He expects things to happen quickly. He's impulsive and hot-headed. And he loves Facebook. He's the kind of person you can expect to push posts about everything, be it a party, an office lunch, office dinner, any pic, vacation pic, or voicing an opinion about anything and everything. Needless to say, because of being socially active, he has thousands of friends on his Facebook. So how does his engagement begin with the insurer? NSIL insurer for our case. Peter purchased a motor insurance for his car some times back. Peter is now relocating to a new place. Apart from other things he needs to do, obviously one of the things is he needs to change his address on records for the motor insurance policy. It's a very simple thing, of course. Can anything go wrong in this? Doesn't seem likely. Let's see. As it happens by Murphy's Law, if anything can go wrong, it most probably will. So Peter makes a call to the support helpline. He's directed to the contact center and he asks for an address change on his existing policy. The customer service rep looks at her information manual and finds that an address change request needs a filled request form, a signed request form, and a proof of residence for this request to be processed. She asks Peter to download the form from the website and provides him with a list of allowed documents. He's supposed to send an email to a common ID requesting policy update. Peter, of course, does that promptly. He has no options apart from that. But he does wonder, why in the world is a support helpline needed if they can't even take his request? Now, Peter's request to the email is ingested and is put in process. Unfortunately, due to a huge backlog, it gets delayed. A couple of days later, Peter calls up the helpline again to check. The call this time is routed to a different CSR. Now at NSIL Insurance, email handling and call handling are done by two separate teams who are working on two different systems with no visibility of each other's work. So the new agent has no visibility of the previous email Peter has sent and asks him to send a follow-up email on the same email ID. Poor Peter, the first thought that crosses his mind is he talking to two different companies? He thinks the helpline is probably an outsourced call center sitting somewhere offshore. So what does he do now? Well, apart from having an argument with the call center rep, thereby wasting a lot of call handling time and of course NSIL's money, Peter goes to NSIL Insurance FB page and posts about this. He mentions how NSIL functions. They seem to be working as different organizations altogether. Now, NSIL Social Cell sifts through posts manually, and with reduced staff under the current lockdown situation, they take their own sweet time to come back to Peter, and then they take his details and raise a request in the processing system. In the meantime, Peter's post has attracted a lot of likes and comments. Peter is shocked that someone can take 2 days to respond on a channel like Facebook. The request is caught as a duplicate at the backend system and is finally resolved. But at what cost? A dissatisfied customer, followed by an image debacle on a social media platform, and duplicate efforts in backend processing. It's a net loss situation for NSIL Insurance. So how can an integrated ESM driven environment address this? For a start, let's take the request directly at the contact center. So in the revised scenario, Peter calls up NSIL helpline and is routed to Natasha, who is able to see his profile based on his phone number. Natasha can even do a few verification checks and then view his policy details. Now, since it's a simple address change request, she captures the details of the new address and creates a case. She also sends an OTP to Peter's mobile for new address verification, where Peter can give her the OTP back for confirmation. She informs Peter now that since they require a document, a supporting document for address change, he will be getting an email requesting for the supporting address proof document. Now, an auto email is triggered to Peter asking for the relevant document, and it contains the list of documents allowed as address proof. So it is essentially the policies are still being followed, but Natasha has ensured the contact connect has been smooth till now, and Peter gets his case registered at the contact center itself with onus on himself for the next step. Moving on, Now Peter is prompt as usual. He promptly replies with an address proof copy and gets an auto confirmation from the system. Peter's email reply, it gets auto attached to the case and it appears in the task list of Roger. Roger is supposed to verify the document, that the document is actually an address proof and can be used ahead. He also verifies that the address is matching the document which has been uploaded. The request is now moved to Mike for approval and update. Now Mike is fairly slow in processing. So, and also he has been under a huge backlog currently owing to staff reduction. And also the TAT is 4 days here. So he sees no hurry in expediting this. In the meantime, all the interactions are threaded to the main case for a quick single view so that anyone can have a view and take a look or decision of the case. Now Peter calls up the helpline again in 2 days. This time he's connected to a different rep, of course, John. John again has a complete view access to the case. He gives an update to Peter that the address document has been verified and it is pending for approval. He told him that the TAT, the turnaround time which is committed, is 4 days, and it will take that long for him to get his policy updated. Now, of course, Peter believes in speed. He's irate. 4 days for a simple address change. How is that even possible? He goes and expresses his displeasure on Facebook. Now, NSIL system, the bots automatically read the Facebook message, auto reply, and categorize it as a complaint. Peter gets to chat with a bot on Facebook Direct Messenger and provides the case number for reference and closure. NSIL bots, they tag the interaction back to the original case and raise the priority of this. The case is now pushed to supervisor Jonathan's queue, and Jonathan gets the changes done. The updated policy is then auto-emailed to Peter, and he also gets a feedback link to provide his feedback. Peter's rating is auto-captured against the case. In addition, Jonathan looks at his weekly dashboards and a report of neglected cases in NPS. He observes, despite whatever the turnaround time says, Mike's cases are increasingly showing a downward NPS trend. He also sees that Mike has a number of neglected cases and they have been rising significantly. Jonathan calls up Mike and gives him appropriate feedback for improvement. On the other hand, last but not the least, Social Cell observes that on the Facebook post which was posted by Peter, a lot of comments from customers have come in expecting a quicker turnaround time for such small changes. They raise this issue internally and the process is observed and advocated for a second level approval to be removed in such scenarios where a verification has happened so that this can be made straight through processing for the second level and time can be reduced drastically. An analysis for case type address changes over the past 1 year shows 100% approval post verification. So essentially, probably nothing is happening at the second step, which is consuming a lot of time. The move goes through and the information is shared back on Facebook by the social cell, saying that based on customer feedback, they have reduced the agreed turnaround time for simple address change request from 4 to 1 day. So effectively, after doing everything, even completing the work for the customer, they have also tried to improve the process. So in effect, the streamlining scenario for ESM, it has helped in a set of multiple things. It has given a single connected view of the organization to the end customer. It has improved process efficiencies. It has improved responsiveness. And it has also managed to convert a potential social disaster into a PR exercise showing it's a responsive company which listens to the customers. So we have had a look at improving a long-running process, how an ESM framework can actually improve an established process. Now let's have a look at managing a new evolving process. We can take COVID-19 as an example. We'll talk about NSIL Care. It's an organization which is involved in care of aging people, including providing medical care. Let's meet our patient, Miss Mary Green. She's a member of NSIL Care and is being treated by Dr. Sharon. Ms. Green has been experiencing high fever and cough for the last 3 days. She has now been diagnosed as COVID-19 positive. Now, NSIL Care is using an incident management system where implementation of a new process is time consuming. It's definitely not doable without IT technical support. So to go around that, in case of a new type of incident, they have a policy of resorting to manual tracking, and then they end up reconciling data once the system changes are in place. So what will happen in a scenario when someone like Ms. Green has been diagnosed as COVID positive? Now, Ms. Sharon diagnosed Ms. Green with COVID-19 and sends an email to the central director. Central director calls for interdisciplinary team meeting to take decision on the unknown virus. Dr. Sharon, in the meantime, has to provide manual updates to him through email. Even for IDT discussions, the details are sent out through email. They discuss about the patient. They take a decision on Ms. Green's line of treatment, including medicines to be administered. System is not able to capture the data, and thus the information is kept manually flowing through in emails, and someone will need to collate it later. Of course, in parallel, medical treatment, isolation, and tracking of contacts has to commence. But there's no proper management. There was delay in providing some of the details to authorities since the filings were not completed on time, and contact tracing wasn't coordinated at all. It took significant time to trace all her contacts. At times, people didn't know who has to pursue whom, and some could have been infected and become spreaders by now. Now, let's see how this can change. At corona onset, Center Director Norman Osborne will now create business rules, assuming he's using an ESM system. As per evolving government guidelines, corona reporting timelines and turnaround times are updated. Any tasks that need to be done as part of new regulations or developments will now be handled through dynamic tasks, which will be created on the ESM framework itself. Now, the scenario when Ms. Green is actually tested positive, Dr. Sharon raises an incident in the system of type COVID-19, and it gets routed to Norman. Norman creates additional tasks as per any new regulations that come in. A related preventive action is also created for contact tracing and origination track, so that it can be traced where this infection come from and who all can are at a risk of catching this infection. Ms. Green is admitted to an isolation ward and she's treated as well as monitored for 14 days. The ward details and medical documents are tagged to the incident in the system. Post 14 days, she's tested and it turns out she's negative now. Thrice, 3 times she tested negative, and the system gave a go-ahead post the third negative. The whole history of activities done with her, complete monitoring is captured in the system with timeline and date stamping so that it can be viewed at one go and a complete case package can be generated. Now, Dr. Sharon prepares a discharge summary for her. Ms. Green finally gets discharged from the care center and the incident is closed. A complete case packet is generated along with the line of treatment and is submitted for filing with the authorities. But this was just one end of a case. In parallel, Norman's team was working to try and identify Ms. Green's contacts. The preventive action of contact tracing is used to keep track of all meetings she has had, potential suspects who need to be tracked. Testing of contacts is part of the case itself. It is tracked to ensure none is missed out. System auto prompts when we are actually approaching the reporting deadlines and we need to prioritize the task. Finally, all contacts are reported within the stipulated time to the government for further action. Once the reports come in, Ms. Green's infection could be traced back to Mr. Kevin Weasley, who started showing symptoms a bit later. Miss Louis Lane, another of the staff looking after Ms. Green, was also found positive despite exhibiting no symptoms at all. So essentially, Miss Lane was tagged as a downstream incident, while Mr. Weasley was tagged as an upstream incident. So we saw a combination of dynamic activity management rules engine, linking of causes and preventive actions, and generating case packets for filing. All this was used to manage to streamline things for Norman, despite this being a new and evolving scenario for him. Essentially, such scenarios can be very common in a number of places. COVID is just one example. It can be even something like an incident happening in a factory. Um, and of course, you need to capture the root cause and create preventive and corrective actions for that as well. Another unprecedented or maybe scenarios which are not thought for is something similar to moving a large part of workforce to home in the current situation, and then managing all the IT support for them, even things like issuing laptops at bulk or issuing IT infrastructure for them to work from home. That's a major task which needs dynamic activity management and tracing to take care of it. So these two are just a couple of examples. I hope we are able to address the scenarios in a bit of detail. I'll hand it over back to Ritesh now to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Anurag. One thing for sure, you're a great storyteller. So I think everyone enjoyed the stories. Well, it was unfortunate that someone had to be tested positive for COVID, but at the end of it, all's well that ends well. So thanks a lot for this. We've been getting some questions. I think we'll take two each so that uh, we can probably be able to uh, adjust as per the time. So, Anurag, the first thing is that we saw that COVID thing was being addressed and we are working towards it. But how does one maintain the knowledge perspective in such a scenario in today's times from the various incidences?
So essentially, what happens, Ritesh, is whenever you create an incident, you try to keep a track of a cause, a preventive, a cause in terms of where did it originate from. So you manage to track these were the key things, or these were the causes which actually resulted in the incident happening, and these can actually be created and pushed to a knowledge repository. So the whole incident, the whole case can actually be moved to knowledge repository with relevant tagging, and whenever a similar thing occurs, it can be searched upon in the knowledge base itself and can show up and can be used.
Thank you. Charles, these are unprecedented times, so people are searching for solutions. Going forward, what do you anticipate? Would these searches go away? Probably people would forget about a solution like ESM, or how would it be in a post-COVID world?
Well, I think that ESM is with us. I mean, it predates COVID, so I don't know why it would go away after COVID. I think that what happens is that COVID accelerates people's understanding that the modern enterprise has many capabilities and resources that often are not fully understood by everybody in the enterprise. And if you do not understand all of the services and resources that your enterprise has, then you may go out and you might even buy something externally in the market, which is then very wasteful. And we, of course, in the new challenging times cannot afford that kind of waste. And so for organizations, and this can happen even in organizations that are relatively small in size, it's not necessarily obvious to the end knowledge worker what the organization has that can help me do my job. And so, no, I don't think that this is something that goes away, after COVID. I think that, people will retain and remember this lesson, that it's important to know what your organization has that can help you deliver the results that you need to for the customer at the end of the day.
Thanks, Charles. Another one for yourself, Charles. Uh, every cloud has a silver lining. So while we live in an age which is unprecedented into a crisis, but do you think new use cases would come up with the post-COVID world. So would there be new departments, new use cases, new people, new customers, new vendors kind of getting benefited on ESM kind of a technology uh, in a post-COVID world?
Oh, that's an interesting question. New customers, new use cases. I mean, certainly anything related to health, and I think we heard, some Anurag suggest some things there. But people will become more concerned for their health. They will be concerned for tracing, traceability, so that on a daily basis, have you come into contact with somebody who might have COVID, or are you yourself perhaps contagious and you didn't know it, and who did you come into contact with? And then all of the downstream ripple effects and concerns that stem from increasing attention to transmissibility. Certainly, as we move into a greater and better, right now we're only in preliminary understanding of how to prevent, how to mitigate, and how to handle and even manage symptoms. Long-term, and this is not a silver lining, but there's going to be long-term care questions. When people come out of COVID, they are not necessarily 100%. And so how do we better support and assist people who are in a recovery mode? I do think that, we will find new forms of entertainment that don't require people to gather together. So already there is a surge of interest in online channels for socialization and activity. And I can tell you, as somebody who's engaged in a few cocktail parties over Zoom, they're not terribly satisfying. But will somebody think of more satisfying ways to promote social interaction and entertainment using bandwidth and technology that we have? I think that the world is wide open for innovations there. If we can't go out with friends as easily anymore, go to concerts, go to sporting events, then what replaces that? Because there are some fundamental human needs that I think people will start to meet in different ways. And so, yes, I think that there are a wide variety of opportunities that people should start, thinking about now as we move into this new, more socially distanced world. Great question.
Thanks, Charles. I think you touched upon a very, very enlightening topic as such. What would happen to the social thread? So that's really, really interesting. Um, Taking a cue from there, Anurag, do you think new technologies would come in from into the customer service? Maybe a virtual customer assistant to take you through various needs that you have?
Yes, Ritesh. I think definitely a virtual assist, even talking bots or listening to voice, converting that to text, and actually using that to resolve problems or take requests. Those are things which are there to some extent. They are here to stay, and they're going to grow significantly. Especially this particular incident or this particular the last few months, they have made us realize that we need to have backups, even if at times, a lot of times, customer prefer to talk to a normal human being. Still, you need to have backups somehow to address all these in case your agents are not there. So definitely, we require that things which can work on voice. You require bots which can actually chat, which can start thinking themselves. AI trying to machine learning based algorithms which can actually read the messages, can learn from their mistakes, respond intelligently to the customer. Um, these are things that are going to they are there to some extent. They're going to improve and they're going to stay. We can't wish them off.
Thanks. I suppose Sophia is going to be a reality in today's times. And
Yes.
one more important thing, should we get our employees well connected to the overall scenario? Would that be something that we should be looking at? What should define the ESM policy first, and how do we take it forward? should we be customer ready first or employee ready first? How should we deploy the strategy, internal or external? So anyone, probably Charles, if you can take that up, please.
Restate the question for me real quick. I didn't quite, it was broke up a little bit on the signal.
Oh, okay, no worries. So what should be the strategy to take it forward? Who should come first, the customers or the employee? Who should be the first target towards the technology like ESM, like in times of today and post that as well? So we cannot be too focused on just COVID, post that as
Right.
well. How should it be?
I don't know that it's either or, because it often is different organizational capabilities. I would say both. And of course, it depends on your particular organization's challenges. If you have any signal that your customer is unsatisfied, that your customer is being poorly attended, you need to pay attention to that immediately. But that doesn't mean that you can slow down on your employee side. Employee experience is also very important. We've researched it extensively at Forrester. My colleagues, Andrew Hewitt and David Johnson, for example, have written and researched extensively on employee experience. And happy employees lead to happy customers. And so by making the employee feel more empowered, more supported in their work, you're likely to then have a follow-up effect of a more satisfied customer. So again, it's not either or, but certainly I would always be very attentive to any indication I have from Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction survey, any kind of indication that people are dissatisfied with their current level of service. Obviously, in the current times, I mean, it should always be taken with great seriousness, but in the current times, even more so if possible.
Thank you, Charles. The last one for Anurag, the role of platforms, or how do you see a package solution for ESM versus something that's based on platforms and can be extended? Where do you see and how do you see it to be more beneficial?
Ritesh, we always face a trade-off when we are trying to define trying to compare a package solution or a cost solution against a platform on which things can be developed. Whenever you're facing dynamic scenarios, or if you are an organization where processes evolve, even when you are trying to become ready for uncertainties, a platform definitely has its own advantages. Probably a platform might lag a bit behind in some features. It covers up for most of them because of the strength of creating things on top of it, getting them deployed very easily, and ensuring that it can change, it can easily accustom itself to the needs of the organization. Of course, as I said, the cost package, a solution, a pre-packaged solution, it is meant for a specific purpose and it does that thing very well. So ultimately, it's going to be based on the needs of the organization. Where exactly do you think you're going to derive more value? If you're looking at something, if you're trying to have a single piece or single application through which you can automate multiple processes and probably use it as a single point for developing everything, have a common internal IT support staff which can do all support on it, probably platform is the place for you to go. If you actually think, no, I want the best features, I want just the point solutions for individual things, and I can have probably another layer connecting all of them so that they don't work in silos. Probably you can go for a packaged one, but there's no, I would say, right or wrong answer for it. You can always have a mix. You can have a platform on which you're actually connecting a number of big point solutions, and that's probably the reality in today's world.
Charles, what's your take on it?
Well, I'm a former enterprise architect, and so I think it's most important to have a clear architecture concept of how everything fits together. This is a complex problem, and you cannot solve it with simply one solution or one platform. It's a routing problem, and it is a data management problem. It's a problem of coordinating systems of record. It's a problem of usability and thinking in terms of the end users in your organization and their overall desire for services. And so all of these things lead to us to understand that it's a system of systems problem. And the most important thing is to have an architecture concept that brings in the most important capabilities, helps you prioritize the capabilities as you need them, and you understand that any given part of the system, you may swap it out over time, you may evolve it over time, but the end results require a cooperative set of relationships across APIs and data feeds and different approaches to exposing the information to users via their user interfaces and so on and so forth. This is an area that I focus on a lot at Forrester. It's kind of core to my research. Again, I'm a former enterprise architect. Was 6 years a chief architect for the business of IT with Wells Fargo. And so it's a very fascinating problem, I think, and one that we are a long ways from considering solved.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Anurag. I think we are just running short of time, but it was quite a knowledgeable and an event which we kind of all learned from, and varied thoughts, views that I'm sure every one of our webinar attendees kind of learned from. But thanks a lot for today. I am sure these times would go and we'd get back to the normal social self that we have been so used to. So thanks a lot for your time. And in short, we'd be interacting with customers or probably the call center agents or the agents in person very soon. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time. This is Ritesh signing off. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.